The second International Forum on Democracy, the Shared Human Values, took place this week in Beijing. The forum gathered over 300 guests from more than 100 countries and talked about diverse forms of democracy. Professor Michael Frederick Dunford was among the participants. He's researching on the relationship between democracy and development. Take a listen. Michael, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very, very much indeed for the invitation. It's a great honor.
You traveled extensively in China, including to some of the very remote areas. I know you've been trying to check how development has been evolving in China. Tell me more about some of the latest travel experiences.
Well, I visited very many parts of China, some of them on several occasions, so I've seen some of the ways in which these areas have changed very, very radically indeed. In December 2021, I went to Anhui, Wuhexian, so the Huaihe crosses the county, but there are a large number of other rivers. And it was fascinating because it's a part of the world in which water is at the center of people's lives. In the past, it was an area where the main concern was initially with basically controlling the flooding, that had devastating effects on people's lives. So, I learned the story of how the flooding had been brought under control. But it's also where people rely on water as a resource. So, they grow crab, they grow rice. And I saw some of the ways in which, cooperative initiatives were set up in order to produce ecological rice and to raise crab and then to sell them on the internet all the way across China.
But earlier the practice was, they wash their vegetables, they wash their clothes, they throw in things into the river, but that has been transformed overall when you were there.
Yeah, when I went, it had changed very, very radically. Now the quality of the water is much, much higher, and some of these old traditions like washing their clothes in the river have actually been reintroduced as a result of improvements in water quality. And they also now have public water supplies in their houses, so they have much higher quality water to drink and to use in cooking and so on.
And that has transformed people's lives there.
It's transformed. You see what's very striking is quite significant increases in income, and these increases in income are actually quite widely diffused, which is why, in a sense, I thought it was a kind of instantiation of this kind of notion of common prosperity.
And it's not just about the infrastructure, isn't it, or the engineering, it's also about communication with the public. The public has to support it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
They have to change their ways of washing the clothes in the river to something else.
Yes, well, they did that, but that was something they did voluntarily in a sense because they became aware of the problems of water quality, although they also actually had to start to accept that they just couldn't throw things into the river. But then, if they see that it is translated into real improvements in their life, then people tend to accept it and be very happy with these sorts of changes.
How do you see the role of development and the role of improving people's lives, the role of reducing the wealth gap in China, playing in the overall political discussions this country has? And also, as a result of that, how is the political system reflecting, in a way, the very important issue about development?
If you say democracy essentially refers to the rule of the people, and I do think that in China, the aim of the government, in a sense, is to improve the real life of the people. But in order to do that, they have to have a very good sense of what people think, what their daily problems are, and so on. And I think I mentioned earlier, that Li Qiang, talked about the need, for local government officials, to conduct surveys to find out what people's needs are, or suggested that they actually go out and talk more to people and then try to find practical solutions. So to me, development is about finding practical ways of improving the quality of the life of all Chinese people. And I think this notion of common prosperity, this comes from 1953. In 1953, the notion was first introduced. And then in the 1980s, Deng Xiaoping repeatedly spoke about common prosperity. And he talked about it as the avoidance of social polarization. Now, in fact, in China, and I do think that reducing those gaps is actually likely to have a very positive impact on China's development because, I did a lot of work in the Western world. And I think I mentioned to you that in the 1950s, 60s and 70s, you saw a situation where the income of low-income groups increased faster than that of high-income groups. And that led to an extraordinary expansion of the domestic market. And that expansion of the domestic market, in a sense, fueled a period of increases in prosperity that had never been achieved in the past and have not been achieved since. So I think that that's very striking. But I think there are other things, that are interesting about China's notion of development, because they're now talking about not just, material progress. Often people say that there's a contradiction, if you like, between tradition and modernity. Now, I actually think that, in a sense, this whole idea of spiritual civilization is actually about, if you like, adapting one's traditions, as part of a project of modernization.
So let me bring back the relationship between what you talk about, the development and the political system of democracy. So tell me more as to how, people's ideas and practices about development actually reflecting, in a way, the nature of democracy that China aspired to build.
People want to see improvements. They want improvements in the quality of their life. They want to live meaningful lives. They want to be respected. They want self-esteem. And I think that, I also think they want to see improved qualities of the environment in which they live. It's kind of notion of ecological civilization. So I think, development is about, it's also, of course, about, innovation, technical progress. So I think that democracy is something that can be measured, in terms of the extent to which it substantively improves the lives of all of the people. I mean, to me, that's what a democracy is. So, and that's why I would say that, China has substantively improved the quality of the lives of virtually all Chinese people, irrespective of who they are and where they are. So that, to me, is the real measure of democracy, because that shows that what is happening in terms of the trajectory and path of development actually reflects, the concerns and interests of the, far overwhelming majority of people. So you can judge whether democracy exists, significantly in terms of outcomes. I mean, procedures also matter, and I mean, China spends a great deal of energy, trying to improve its procedures, through this kind of whole process, this development of this whole process, democracy. But I keep coming back to what one should see is improvements in the quality of people's lives, the quality of the environment in which they live, the quality of their relationships with other people, whether if they get into great difficulties, there are people to help them.
So my final question, very briefly to you, Michael. To you, what is democracy?
To me, I mean, I would say democracy is essentially a set of outcomes that improves the lives of everyone, including those, who do not acquire great wealth, including those who do not occupy, high positions in a social hierarchy. I think clearly, people's contributions differ and people's rewards will differ. But I want to see. I think democracy would be translated into something which actually delivers real improvements that people, consider themselves to be improvements in their lives, and their capacity, to express their concerns and to see action, in the light of the concerns they express.
I see. Michael, thank you so much for sharing with us your thoughts.
All right, well, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
And that's all the time we have for today. If you'd like to know more, search World Insight or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei. On behalf of my team, thanks for being with us. Bye for now and have a great weekend.